Chris Ash is the new defensive coordinator at Texas, and we got to talk about it after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I'm not on Step Milk. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today, we got to talk about Chris Ash, who was named the new defensive coordinator at Texas. I shouldn't say he was named. Report is out of orangebloods.com. But first, Horns247, that he's going to be the dude. Now, they're going to probably name him after National Signing Day, which is Wednesday. I should say early signing day. National Signing Day is still February, but anybody that pays attention to this channel or pays attention to college football recruiting all knows that signing day is actually December 18th. That said, Tom Herman is nothing if not predictable and or loyal, depending on how you want to draw this up. I'm sure Drew Maringer kind of feels some kind of way about that, and Tim Beck probably feels some kind of way about that, and Corby probably feels some way about that as well. But let's start with Ash. Ash was fired in September as the head coach at Rutgers after he got spanked by Michigan 52-0. It wasn't working out. He was 8-32 as the head coach for the Scarlet Knights, which was saying something because Kyle Flood had that job before him, and he managed to go 24-27, which ain't great, but it ain't no 8-32 either. And Ash, it felt like this was going to be a good job for him, although I don't know that Rutgers is a good job for anybody. Because if you know about Chris Ash, you know that he and Tom Herman go way back to Paul Rhodes' staff. I probably need to go and look more at that 2009 Paul Rhodes Iowa State staff because both Ash and Tom Herman were on it. And both those guys ended up being on the Ohio State squad that won the first college football playoff national championship. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So check it. Ash coached defensive backs at Iowa State for the Cyclones at the same time that Tom Herman was the offensive coordinator at Iowa State. And then Ash got hired away as the defensive back coach at Wisconsin for Brett Bielema. Right? He followed, or it was elevated to defense coordinator, followed Brett Bielema to Arkansas where he was defense coordinator for a little bit, and then was basically given the same job beside Luke Fickell at Ohio State with Urban Meyer. And hey, Tom Herman actually ends up being there. So they're like, cool, we got the band back together. And it worked because that defense had an Alex Grinch kind of turnaround where they went from bad to real good, right? And good enough to obviously win a national championship. And then he took the job at Rutgers. Tom Herman went on to be a head coach at Houston, did well at Houston, took the job at Texas, and has been average at best, 10-4 with the Sugar Bowl win that everybody knows about. Now, Tom Herman has decided to make a philosophical shift, and he's no longer going to be the play caller. He's going to hire an offensive coordinator that is going to probably bring in a new scheme because the power spread just ain't a-working in this Big 12. But I like the Chris Ash hire, one, because Herman will trust him enough to probably leave him alone, and because Chris Ash runs the same sort of scheme that Alex Grinch runs, the same sort of scheme that Gary Patterson runs. It's a four-man front, and they play match quarters press on the outside. And that, I think, is the way that you're going to have to play college football today because we're seeing folks go away from Texas spread, power spread, whatever it is you want to call it, basketball on grass, and more to a pro-rate kind of offense, the one that Oklahoma runs, the one that the LSU Bengals run. I should say Tigers, Bayou Bengals, whatever. It's in vogue, right? It's the one Ryan Day runs out there at Ohio State because we all know that play-action passes work no matter what. Texas Tech has a play-action pass in its arsenal that does not actually have a run play to complement it. They just run the guard pulling and the tailback kind of following him out there who ends up being on a release. It's actually kind of a cool play because as a linebacker reading it, you think run. So you're probably taking yourself out of the play. And we know that passing is also the most efficient way to score points. That said, you need to have outstanding defensive back play at all times, and Chris Ash comes from coaching safeties and being a co-defense coordinator with Luke Fickell, which was a job that Alex Grinch had last year before he took the job at Oklahoma. Now, Ash is also owed $8.5 million by Rutgers. Now, how much of that money is going to get offset by what Texas decides to pay Ash, we'll see. I would figure that it's probably going to be in the $1.5 to $2 million range, and Rutgers still owes Ash a lot of that money, but it wouldn't owe as much money. And for all three of you Rutgers fans, you should know that none of this money is going to impact Greg Schiano's hiring pool for assistants. But I also found it interesting that Drew Maringer was an offensive coordinator for Chris Ash for just a little bit before he took the wide receiver co-offensive coordinator hybrid role at Texas where he just got fired. Tom, I don't know exactly how you feel about moving all these people around that you personally know and personally have relationships with, and you're a loyal dude, but Chris Ash was also defensive analyst for Texas as late as October, right? So, like, it's not as if he hadn't been around. And apparently, according to Anwar Richardson, at orangebloods.com, he'd interviewed for the job last week. Also takes him out of the running for the Ohio State defensive coordinator job, which I think is a good thing. I'm not a fan of retreads. I'm not a fan of bringing back a defensive coordinator who was good 5 years ago. But it should be stated that 5 years ago, Chris Ash was really, really good. And I don't know how much of that is going to translate. I don't know whether or not he's going to have a Mike Stoops type of deal where he comes back, figures out that the Big 12 is a little bit more difficult to defend than you originally thought, and then you get ran over. I know that there's a lot of folks that wanted this job to go to Chris Ash. There's a lot of folks that felt good about getting Tom Herman and Chris Ash back together because you feel like you're going to be able to rekindle some sort of play caller magic when the two are actually mutually exclusive in many ways. I get that some people tell me that you play complementary football, which is to say that your defense complements your offense. But the only way that works is if the defense gets stops, right? And if the defense gets stops, it's always a compliment to the offense. And the offense scores, it's always going to be a compliment to the defense. It's about getting stops on third down. And coincidentally, that was something Todd Orlando was able to do at Texas in 2017. It was like number 3 in the country in that statistic. I think he held teams to like 21% on third down. But those numbers ballooned in 2018 and got to gaudy in 2019. And you can't squeak out a win at home against Kansas 50-48 and expect everybody to be okay. You can't give up 569 yards of offense, 6.6 yards of play to Kansas and expect everybody to be okay. You can't get absolutely beat down by Baylor, styled on by Ohio State in Ames, take a bad L to, I don't know if it's a bad L anymore because LSU's undefeated, and take a decisive L in the Cotton Bowl to Oklahoma at OU Texas and expect everybody to be okay, right? I understand that many people think, myself included, that Todd Orlando got a bad rap because his defense was mostly banged up and he had to play a bunch of puppies that just weren't ready to play football yet. And I think Chris Ash is going to benefit from that, especially if he can get those safeties playing the kind of football I expect those safeties to be able to play, because Caden Stearns could be one of the best defensive backs in the country next year. He just needs to stay healthy. That's really what it is. And you also have dudes that I think can actually cook, like Anthony Cook. I think you have absolutely outstanding talent over there. And if you want to run some version of a 4-2-5, I think you could be successful. What I really am interested to see out of all of this is how quickly Chris Ash is able to recruit Texas, how much people trust him as he's trying to recruit Texas, and what the kiddos feel about the hire. Got to feel like they kind of sort of know who was doing what and why. I also think that you look at what Texas has been defensively, and you don't necessarily feel like Chris Ash is going to absolutely bring them back to lockdown defense that they kind of had in 2017, but not really. Because even in that 2017 squad, they were really good, but did they win a bunch of games? And I really think it's going to come back to the offensive coordinator, right? Because if Graham Harrell takes this job, I think you got an opportunity to be really good at Texas, really good being 9-10 wins. You got an opportunity to absolutely take on Oklahoma in a fair fight this time. However, all this comes back to Tom Herman, right? This is year 4, and this is a year for which people should get fired if they don't have it humming the way that it should be humming. Because at Texas, you expect to be Oklahoma. You expect to do the kind of things that Oklahoma's been doing over the last 5 years, which is make 4 out of the first 5 college football playoffs, 4 out of 6. I get that number messed up, but the last 3 in a row for certain, right? And you expect to kind of rekindle something that you had at Ohio State. But the thing about Ohio State was that was Urban Meyer. He was the great talent evaluator, and he was also the guy that brought in guys like Tom Herman and guys like Chris Ash from other people's staffs and was able to lure them away. I think that getting fired head coaches to be your coordinators, you can go either way, right? As opposed to, you know what, I'm just going to go poach, which is what Lane Kiffin is trying to do at Ole Miss, and I'm going to have more to say about that later. But that's how I thought Texas was going to be built. Poach somebody off for somebody else's staff and pay them what they're worth, or maybe even more than they're worth, so that you can get really good wins into Texas next year. Because, man, you got to go to Baton Rouge next year, and that's not going to be an easy win, not with this team. I don't care who the quarterback is. So it's going to be interesting. And I also think that the change of philosophy offensively is going to have a lot to say with Sam Ehlinger. I think that Sam Ehlinger could run an air raid of sorts, or pro raid of sorts. But it's all going to be about who the play caller is and how much of a leash And by leash, I mean like extension cord type of deal that Tom Herman is willing to give that person, and leave Chris Ash alone and let him coach defense. I think he'll be okay. And I guess I'm going to give this hire a B- because it doesn't wow anybody, but it's not a suck hire either. It's not the kind of thing where you're going, wait, Everett Withers, what are you doing down here? It's not that either. For if anything, you just made life harder on Ohio State, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, although I think Ohio State's going to end up knocking their defensive coordinator hire out of the park. I still think that Marcus Freeman is the guy. That pool just got a lot narrower now that Chris Ash has been hired away. And I think Ohio State's going to be a really good football team next year, if not, again, one of the best football teams in the country. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.